सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्. Om. Okay, so last time we had covered some of the essentials of dharma and to understand like what you lose when you follow a dharma, and we'll just continue from there. So if somebody would like to read, volunteer. It's from this compromise and moral order.
Yeah, I can go.
Okay.
Compromise and moral order. If you can see the immensity,
Oh, sorry, 1 second.
that's okay.
Yeah.
If you can see the immensity of the loss with reference to compromises made to gain such things as money, power, etc., you are mature. You will not go for the bargain because you see it as a bad bargain. You should see that what you lose is more than what you gain, which has nothing to do with the moral majority. If there is a universal structure, and there is, then what I lose must definitely be much more than what I gain. Therefore, the education needed for maturity is to know what I lose. Suppose I say, you will go to hell, and you do not accept the idea of hell, then that is the end of that. You will simply say, you go to your hell if there is one. I am not going because I do not accept a hell. How do we know there is a hell other than where we are now? Hell is simply a belief. Suppose it is wrong. The threat of hell is certainly not a very convincing argument for telling the truth. Perhaps I do not believe in hell or do not care if there is a hell. If there is a hell, I will tackle it when I get there. It is not my problem right now. All that I want to do is get out of the hot water I am in right now. I will deal with the heat in hell later. This is a different thing. I am in hot water right now and $5,000 will make a difference. However, if the person knows that he will be the loser by gaining this $5,000, he may not compromise for the sake of that money. If I were to ask him, why do you want to why do you want this $5,000? And he would say, because I can then buy certain things. Then I ask, why do you want those things? And he replies, so that I can be happier, more secure. But if I were to show him that, in the process of getting this $5,000, he becomes incapable of being happy, and hence the bargain is a bad one, then he will not compromise. Now he understands the price he may have to pay for the compromise. This is how one understands the value of a value. No one wants money for money's sake. If if that were the case, a cashier's job would be good enough because by just feeling money, you would be happy. You want money for your sake so that you can be happy. Money is very interesting. Without it, certain things cannot happen, but there is a limit to what money can offer. It can buy you a book, but it can never make you read unless the author offers you $1,000 to read it. Then, of course, you will read it overnight. But even then, the money cannot make you understand what the book says. For that, you require something else, something other than money. Money can buy music, but it can never make you understand music. You can hire the best musician to sing for you, but the money you pay to the musician cannot stop you from falling asleep during the performance, unless, again, you are offered money to stay awake. Thus, money can provide situations. That is all it can do, and money does do that, which nothing else can. A point to be remembered. But then, the enjoyment for the person. You are the one who is to enjoy the music. If I lose the if I lose the enjoyer in the process of acquiring the money that will provide the opportunities for me to enjoy, then it is a bad bargain. Therefore, the whole education or inner maturity of a human being is not in knowing what is right and wrong, which we all know, but in knowing what I lose when I do the wrong thing. This I should know. What will I lose? How much will I lose? If I know this very well, it is not possible for me to go for the bargain. This is what is to be understood here. When you tell a lie, you are speaking and therefore you are a doer, you a performer, an actor. You are doing the action of speaking, and as the actor, when you tell a lie, you are saying something that is not true to what you think. Therefore, the thinker is one and the actor is quite another. You know one thing, and by the time it comes out of your mouth, it is entirely different because what you say and what you think are not the same. This means there is already a split in you. As a speaker, a doer who is telling a lie, I behave in such a manner that I create a split in myself, like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr.
Dr.
Hyde.
Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, famous
Yeah.
book.
Uh,
Um, so this beautiful, right? Like Pujya Swamiji, I think, explains so much the value of values, which is another series of talks itself that Pujya Swamiji has greatly elaborated upon. And I highly encourage buying that book. It's called Value of Values. And so in a nutshell, Pujya Swamiji explains that piece over here. And very beautifully, he also explains the purpose of money. What is the value of money? And what utility it provides in our life. So here Puja Samani is not dismissing money, of course, because money is Lakshmi. But what he's speaking about here is illicitly gaining some amount of money, right? Like through some deceitful means which are unethical. And he's explaining why the loss of acquiring money in that manner is greater than the gain that comes from the acquisition of that money. And what you lose here is something that we spoke about, I think, in some detail last time. So, any questions here before we proceed? Okay, we can continue if you want to read on.
the thinker and doer split. Once I create a split in myself, then as a doer, I am different from the one who knows, who thinks. If this split has taken place, do you think that you can succeed in life? Even with money or whatever else, you cannot. Because the person, you, is already split. As a thinker, I am entirely different from the performer, the one who does things, the doer. There is only There is only one I, and when I see myself as a split person, then I cannot enjoy what money buys. Can someone read?
Could someone else read?
Sure.
Yeah.
You cannot do a wrong thing without a conflict, and every conflict naturally creates a split in you. The conflict itself is the split, and the split creates conflict. The more conflict there is, the more split the person is. This is not a conflict of choice, it is a conflict between me, the knower, and me, the doer. The split is in the very personality, the very person, so that the mind is unable to enjoy the pleasures that money has bought. If a person already has a split between what he or she thinks and does, how can there be enjoyment of anything, whether it be food or a beautiful house? Being in conflict, the person is also potentially moody. You have to determine whether or not someone is in a good mood before you can talk to the person, and good moods come only occasionally. When you say what you have to say, the person may feel so bombarded that he or she gets into yet another bad mood. Thus, the person is nothing but mood, potential mood, all due to split. the conflict between the thinker and the doer. Can I continue?
Yes.
By analyzing such situations, we find that this split, which is the basis of all psychological problems, has something to do with our rubbing against the law of dharma. Just look at yourself. When you're in conformity with the order, there is always freedom, there is harmony, joy, and a certain composure. Whereas when you rub against the order, you get rubbed in the process. No one can rub against something without getting rubbed. If you rub against a rough bark of a tree with your bare body for 5 minutes, you will see who gets rubbed. And this knowledge will stay with you for at least 10 days. That you never rub against anything without getting rubbed in the process needs to be well understood.
So this is again very important that here, Buddhist Swamiji spoke about this version of some hell, right? That some religions will give you the threat of hell to say that, okay, here are the consequences. Okay, at the end of the day, it is just a belief. I'm not saying that Naraka, Swarga, these places don't exist, but they're not hell as we speak of in the Abrahamic terms. So there's a distinction drawn over there. But here, what Pujya Swamiji is explaining is something in the here and now, which is that immediately when a person tells a lie, there is that split. That split is the basis of psychological problems. In fact, all psychological problems are nothing but a split in one's personality, in one psyche. So if I'm not together as a person who says things and does, you know, things in a way that are aligned to each other, then there will always be that split. And there will always be some anxiety, and there will always be some fear and nervousness about consequences and about what I said. But let's say if you make a decision and you've thought through that decision, you understand the consequences of the decision, and you go ahead with it. Now, even if the outcome is not very favorable to you, the fact that you did what you thought and what you thought was well considered and not just, I guess, impulsive, that you don't feel so bad about your decisions, right? Like an example I could give is somebody recently asked me something about, like, if you invest in XYZ place in the stock market and if you lose money, are you going to feel bad? And I was like, not really, because the only reason I would feel bad is if I made an impulsive decision based on a tip that somebody shared or based on some random news bite that just flows about, and then I just I guess put my bets on something that I've not considered well enough. But let's say if you've researched a company, you've studied the balance sheets, you've done your due diligence, understanding the financials, you understand the management, you understand the moat that the company has, the technological growth, and everything related to that. And after that, you make a call. And suppose your call is wrong. It's very hard to blame yourself because you know that if I had to choose again in the past, would I make a different choice? And the answer to that would be probably no. So then the reason that your investment or something, whatever it may be, did not go in your favor was because there was some prarabdha involved, but not because you did not put in the effort, right, to think. And so your thought, your well ascertained, well aligned, well considered thoughts have to be in conformity with your actions, with your words, and all of these things have to be together on the same plane where there is no conflict or a need to perform samanvaya between each of these three. You speak what you think and you do what you say. Right? That's really a very simple formula to success, I would say. So that's what Pujya Samji is explaining over here, that don't be a split person, because if you tell a lie, you know that there is a lie that's being told. And that's why people say you don't have to remember the truth, because the truth is evident. In some ways, you talk about the Atma as self-shining, it is self-evident, Swayam Bhati. Truth at a mithya level, of course, is also a little bit like that, and it shines on its own. It doesn't have to be remembered. Your fingers don't twitch, and your speech is not nervous or anxious or whatever. You just speak truth plainly and with a very clear mind and clear conscience. And when you speak that kind of truth, there's no, I guess, there's no pressure that's being built up in your body, in your mind as a person, because the more you get into the habit of lying and deceiving yourself and others, there's a sort of inner pressure and inner turmoil that keeps building up, building up, building up. You can feel it till here. You feel it like There's a somatic reaction that your body starts feeling with all of these mental splits. And that's true, by the way. Like in psychology, also, when your mind is sufficiently disturbed, it starts showing up in your body. All sorts of bodily disorders begin to manifest when the mind is profoundly disturbed. So there's a connection between all of these things really, and it's got its basis in dharma. That when you live a life aligned to dharma, then I would say 95, 99% of all of the problems that we have in life just either go away or they become manageable, which is more and less the same thing. Because you're never really problem free, but it's more a matter of how maturely you face a problem. And that's what the result of living a dharmic life is. Apart from other results also, but this is an immediate result. There are other adrashta phalams also. Adrashta means to be seen later. They will manifest later in time. So, for example, if you perform a yajna, there is a result associated with it. It may not be immediate, but it will come in time. So, dharma has two phalams. Phalams means fruits or results. One is drashta phala, which is immediate, and the other is adrashta. So, for example, when you do mantra japa, there is a peace of mind and tranquility that is immediate. You immediately feel that, and that is a drashta phala of the mantra upasana. And the adrashta phala is the promised fruit of whatever that mantra is. If you do a Purusharana or whatever it is, there's a certain fruit, mantra siddhi, associated with it. And that mantra siddhi that is promised also comes to fruition upon the completion of the sadhana. But even in the immediate moment, you feel a certain release and a peace of mind. It's all living a life of dharma. Any questions here? Okay, we can proceed. Shikanji, if you'd like to.
For every gain, we need to know the loss. Having understood that we cannot rub against the moral order without being rubbed in the process, it takes even more understanding to know exactly how much we lose by performing certain actions. It becomes a matter of self esteem. What kind of self esteem can there be when a division has been created between the thinker and the doer? Sooner than later, you will conclude that you are worthless. This process can be seen when you make a very simple resolution, such as tomorrow I'm going to get up early in the morning at 6 o'clock and I'm going to meditate for half an hour. You have decided that to begin the day with some kind of meditation is good, and this is what you want to do. Therefore, you're going to get up half an hour earlier than usual and meditate. Whose decision is this? It's not someone else's, it's yours. You even set your alarm clock to ring at 6 o'clock, and it does. In fact, it never stops. It goes on beeping, beeping, beeping. Then what do? Annoyed, you turn the alarm off and go back to sleep. Do you know why? Because the one who made the decision last night to get up half an hour earlier did not consult the one who had to wake up the next morning. This is like a husband making a decision to go on a weekend family trip without informing or consulting his wife. The decision to wake up earlier was made by someone who thinks and figures things out, whereas I'm the one who has to get up. Therefore, you had better consult me before you decide anything. Between husband and wife, there can be some consultation. But when I'm thinking that I will get up half an hour earlier, the waker is not there to be consulted. Here is a real problem because the waker is also me. While this plight looks very simple, it is actually a very complex issue. The split between the one who thinks and knows and the one who does is a very self detrimental split, one that eventually and naturally leads to self condemnation. If you tell me to do something and I decide not to do it, it is quite different from when I tell myself to do something and I cannot do it. Once, twice, or thrice is not a problem. But when I cannot conform to my own decisions more times than not, what self esteem will I have? If it happens only once, I can always justify not having done something. But if I do it consistently, then I cannot have any self esteem. And without self esteem, no one can really help me. Even the Lord cannot boost me up because intrinsically I have a problem. Therefore, I am the loser. If I am together as a person, I can enjoy sports and a variety of other situations that do not cost money. I can even enjoy myself, which also does not cost money. Whereas, if in the process of gaining money, I lose myself, the transaction is definitely a bad bargain. To know this about myself is education, it is growing up. Who then can afford not to have such knowledge? Because I have a faculty of choice, I must necessarily exercise that choice. I must know the norms which are the basis upon which I choose. These norms are known to us by our own common sense. The only education the only education needed with regard to them is an understanding of what I lose when I gain something. In a so-called gain, I should be able to see how much I lose. If I do not lose, then the gain is truly a gain and is worthwhile. Whereas if I lose, the gain is not worthwhile. Therefore, the means that one follows in gaining one's ends are very important.
I mean, just to read these last few sections, it's a thorough introspection on the field of psychology. Like everything that you can think about, most things you can think about, except for the hardcore, I guess chemical imbalances, which sometimes require additional treatment through medicines and such. Like most of those cognitive disorders, due to cognitive behavioral dysfunctions or whatever else it may be, those things can be completely, and I'm not even exaggerating here, completely eradicated just by following the advice in these last couple of sections. Just beautiful. I think this should be it's hard to say mandatory reading because you don't want to force this down somebody's throat, but this should be spoken about, taught, by parents to their children, by teachers to their students. This is important because oftentimes, if you see, when we study the Shastras, such topics are not weaved in, into the mix with along with the citations that we see from the different texts. But this is just beautiful. Like, we just have to stop for a moment and appreciate that Pujya Swamiji had the brilliant insight to bring this out to us. Such a profound study of human psychology. Ha, Shrikantji.
So, even in cases, and I think fully, uh, I think I can fully appreciate the depth in this last few paragraphs. Um, in cases of things like gender dysphoria and those types of things, is does it seem like this type of split would still happen, or is that a combination of this and some chemical imbalance?
Yeah, it's usually things are combinations usually, but
Hmm.
I'm going to give my very unprofessional, uneducated, I guess,
Hmm.
armchair psychologist opinion with because I'm not a psychologist. But I'm still going to give some thoughts over here because this is very important. This is something that kids, especially in the current Gen Z, are facing a lot. So gender dysmorphia is there's a genetic basis in very rare cases. Some fraction, I don't remember what exactly the percentage are, but there's a small fraction where the individual is born with both male and female parts. And in such cases, truly classification is not easy. In that case, you can say this is where the non-binary truly applies. And we have a third category for that, Napunsaklinga. In our ancient traditions, these kinds of people who are born with both male, female body parts, uh, you have Napunsaklinga, and that's where they were getting classified. Now, the percentage of those people is a small fraction of society, a small fraction of society. What we are seeing in the West, probably going to get fewer video views because of YouTube's algorithm again, but we'll talk about this because it's a problem of wokeism. In the West, in the last 15 years, 10, not even 15 years, let's call it something like 10 years, there's been a steep rise of gender dysmorphia. Now, evolution works very slowly, as everybody here, I'm sure, is aware of. Evolution works at the evolutionary scale of time. Populations evolve, individuals do not evolve. Right? I think, does everybody understand what I mean by that, or should I clarify further? There's a misconception that people have that an individual evolves from generation to generation. Like, you have a parent, and then the parent gives birth to a child, and the child is more evolved. And the next child is more evolved, and the next offspring is more evolved, and evolved, and evolved, and evolved. And that's how evolution takes place. That is not true. That is a completely wrong notion. Evolution takes place through populations, through survival of the fittest, through choice selection, through many factors where those populations which are not fit to survive within a given ecosystem have lesser propensity to pass on their genes to the next generation, because the ones who are more capable and more fit to survive have those traits which are required for survival. I'll give a very simple example. Like in my backyard itself, yeah, the indigenous population of squirrels, there used to be red squirrels. Okay, and those red squirrels are tinier in size. They have a smaller tail, and they're just generally having less mass. They don't weigh as much as the gray squirrels. Now, everywhere you look, there are only gray squirrels. And yesterday I was just standing on the deck and I was marveling at these gray squirrels because they are like expert acrobats. Okay, they can jump from one tree which is like far away to the other one, and they won't skip a beat. They land exactly on the branch that they wanted to land on, and they can hang upside down. They can do all sorts of crazy things. So these gray squirrels are basically outcompeting the red squirrels. You don't see any red squirrels anymore. You see only the gray squirrels over here. These fat gray squirrels with bushy tails. So in the next few generations, the red squirrel population is going to be completely wiped out, and the gray squirrels will remain. And we'll call that evolution. And we'll call that evolution because this population survived, and the other population, which was not fit to survive in this environment, did not survive. So now, when we talk about human beings, and you talk about any creature, evolution takes generations to start showing itself. And it is populations that evolve, not individuals. Okay. Now, why am I making this point is very important. If we say that somehow it is natural for so many people to have gender dysmorphia, then the question has to be asked, why suddenly the last decade? Why not the century before that, or the century before that, or the century before that? Why did they suddenly, like a cloud of locusts, suddenly just pop up in the sky and became a thing everywhere? Um, it is certainly not a biological factor. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's not a genetic factor because genes take a long time to propagate and to start showing these uh, differences. It is purely a cultural brainwashing. That's what it is. If you are made to believe that you are not who you think you are, sometimes that is enough for you to question who you are. It doesn't have to be something physical. It doesn't have to be something related to your body anatomy. It's all here. And it's all here because there's a certain social conditioning, whether it's in the education system or the role models that you follow, or the I guess proliferation of social media, especially the last 10, 12 years, when even Facebook, for example, they removed the age limit. Now you can join at any age, right? Before, whereas there used to be a certain cutoff earlier. Now you can do lots of things. There's democratic access to social media, even for children who should not actually be on social media because they're not mature enough to face the barrage of ideas and to a large degree the toxicity and the manipulation that is out there on social media when other people talk to you. Now imagine you are a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old. What does a 9-year-old or 10-year-old know about life? Nothing. They've just learned how to divide numbers at this point. What do they know about life? Very little. Now suppose you're a 9 or 10-year-old and your parents are working or they are doing something else in their life. and you log on to the internet and you meet a stranger or you join some group and you start seeing these people who are talking about experimenting with your gender, experimenting with your sexuality, asking you that, oh, you think you are male but you could be female, you think you are female but you could be male, you think you are this but you are that, oh, sexuality and gender are only social constructs, there is no biological basis to this. What are these people going to think? First of all, every child, especially a teenager, is a rebel. If you're not a rebellious person when you're a teenager, there is something wrong with you. Either that or you're a Mahatma. It's one of those two. Okay. Either you're a great Mahatma or there is something defective in you. Because every teenager is going to question life. Every teenager is going to question their parents about the choices that their parents made, about the choices that society makes, about everything. Because you, as a teenager, are discovering the truths of life, you're discovering yourself as a person. I'm not talking about Atma or anything. Okay. This is out of Vedanta territory at this point. We are talking about the individual, the person. That person is trying to discover who they are. They're trying to come to terms with their body. There's puberty going on. Suddenly, they find the opposite gender very attractive. Suddenly, their body is growing in different ways that they did not expect. Suddenly, they are asking questions that, wait, what is happening to me? And during that time period, you start telling them that, oh, by the way, this is not what it appears to be. This is that, and that is this. Now they will get confused. They will get confused. They will ask questions. They will ask questions. They will plant self doubts. Sometimes somebody else will plant those doubts for them. And then all of these things give rise to the fact that one day, one fine day, that teenager will open their room and then they'll go down to the dining table and they'll put their palms on the table and they'll say, Mommy, I don't feel like a girl anymore. I think I'm a boy. And that's what happens. That's gender dysmorphia as things are right now. The majority of gender dysmorphia is a psychological issue, not a genetic issue. A very small number of gender dysmorphia problems are genetic in nature. And those small problems can be treated, but treated in the sense can be addressed by accepting that there is a third category of Napunsaka where these people belong. It's a third category. You don't try to say, oh, you're a girl or you're a guy. Napunsaka you are in between. You are the third gender. But for the majority of the people who have gender dysmorphia and who come out of the closet, so to speak, because this is the new coming out, right? First it was something else, now it's a different one. It's all psychological. And and when I say psychological, I mean it is illegitimate. Because the psychological ailment is a thought process that needs to be addressed. You cannot put them in the same category as those who have chromosomal disorders. So that's just my opinion. But I think it's a good opinion.
in
Yeah.
the in the context of losing something for gaining something here, right? Or losing something when you attempt to gain something. um, what is it that we would kind of lose when you attempt to kind of adjust your own self identity, um, based on the gender dysphoria?
You lose all the benefits that are endowed to you as a human being who is born with a certain bodily swadharma.
Hmm.
If I am born as a man, I have a certain archetypal role to play. My archetypal role is to be a hero.
Hmm.
Right? Every man wants to be a hero. There's no such thing as a heroine. That is not an archetype, honestly. It's just a very 21st century thing. And I'm not saying women aren't heroes of sorts. What I mean is this knight in shining armor. I'm talking about that kind of a hero.
Mhm.
Okay. Very, very few women in their childhood want to be a superhero or like Superman or Supergirl. Right? The Supergirl notion doesn't work. Superman works. Supergirl doesn't work as well. Batgirl doesn't work as much as Batman does, and that's why Batgirl TV serials get cancelled after the first season because nobody watches them. And the female archetype is very different. Women are having their own sort of superpowers, but not the kind of archetype that men want to live. No woman wants to rescue a man on a horse. Okay. No woman wants to respect a guy who's in a tower saying, save me, and the woman comes on a, white steed with a lance and be like, oh, come here, my man, jump, 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 I've got you, my prince. Like, no, you're not a prince, you're a loser. I don't want to see you ever in my life again because you're a loser who can't take care of yourself. So a girl doesn't want to become that, and a guy doesn't want to be rescued. If you're a guy, there's a certain role that you have to play. And I'm not saying you have to play, but I'm saying it is more ingrained in us that, okay, this is the archetype that I have to live. When you deny that, you're denying a very important part of your existence. You're denying the fact that today you can get married to a woman, because that is one of the archetypes of men as well, that they are looking to have a partner. Because what is a guy looking for? And I'm speaking here purely in evolutionary terms. I'm not talking about Sanatana Dharma or nothing. Simple terms, the guy wants to pass on the genes and foster the genes to push it to the next generation. That's all it is, right? It is survival. It is at a very basic, I won't say human instinct, it is a basic instinct of life.
Life. Yeah.
Life wants to survive, life wants to thrive, life wants to pass down its DNA. And a guy wants to do that. Now, what happens when you start messing around with your body and you start taking estrogen pills instead of, letting your testosterone dictate who you are at an individual level? Now, you're neither a guy nor are you a girl. Now, no girl is going to be attracted to you. It's a fact. Why would she be attracted to you if you are non estrogen therapy at this point? You're trying to become a girl, so that part of your life is gone. Basically, there's no girl who's going to like you anymore. And then you can say that, no, 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 I don't want to be liked by girls. That's okay. Then what are you living for? Let's ask that question. I'm not saying you're only living to get married. I'm saying that that's an important part of life. But what else are you living for? That the person will become an activist only, na? He will rage against society. He, she, it, whatever you want to call it, will rage against society because somehow all of the psychological problems that the person has carried and frankly built for himself or herself or itself are all not, the person will not take responsibility for who they are and what they stand for. They will point at society to say that you made me what I am and you are the one who is the oppressor. We are the oppressed. But who has made you that? Yourself, your choices, your influences, the people that you spoke to, the sum of your experiences and the choices that you made you a lesser person than you were born to be. And this applies for women also. Women who try to shift their archetype from going, allowing estrogen to play its role and then start to consume testosterone pills. That's another problem. So this creates a conflict, an identity conflict, because the fact of the matter is that society is dimorphic. Society is dimorphic because the Mithya Jagat is dimorphic. You can say it is trimorphic to a certain degree, but for the most part, it is dimorphic, right? Because you have darkness and you have light, you have
Mhm.
dharma and you have adharma, and then you have pap karma and you have punya karma, and then you have narak and you have swarga. But of course, we have the third category also. But I'm saying that it's very difficult to fit within the third category and um, I guess become mainstream simultaneously. You cannot mainstream the exceptions. You can only mainstream what is mainstream, what is the norm. People shake hands is a norm. You don't shake your feet, right? You meet somebody on the road and you try to shake feet with each other. You won't do that. Now, is there something wrong in doing that? No, there's nothing wrong in that. It's just not an established norm. So if you try to shake feet with somebody, it's going to look stupid, and you're going to come across as an idiot, and nobody will want to talk to you, and they will isolate you in society. So there are certain norms that are the way they are because not because humanity decided that these are the right norms, but because those norms came about as a consequence of evolution.
Mhm.
And that's why, as Hindus, we are not allergic to the notion of evolution, unlike the Abrahamics. Abrahamics cannot stand evolution, you see, because God snapped his fingers. Father up in heaven decided to do this, and on day one, this happened. On day two, this happened. On day three, this happened. Day four, this happened. Day five, that happened. Day six, this happened. Day seven, he rested. And that's why you have Sundays off in the Western system. And we also adopted that system for some reason because we are copycats of the West. But
So
now, yeah,
if we kind of use the vocabulary used in the last few paragraphs, right? The activists who are forcing us to adopt their way of looking at things and saying, hey, we got to accept all these people. There's nothing unusual about somebody wanting to be their opposite gender. They're essentially forcing us to rub against the natural order.
Absolutely. Because if you are born a certain way, and if your thought process is influenced to make you something else, that is going against the order. And that's why I have the utmost empathy for a person who is born with chromosomal disorders or gender dysmorphia by
Mhm.
birth, by genetics. I have absolutely zero sympathy for a person who chooses to mess around with their gender because it seems like a cool idea.
Mm.
That is the true dysmorphia of the mind. It is mental dysmorphia. It is all identity crisis, pure identity crisis. See,
Mm.
today, a girl is supposed to have certain feminine traits. A guy is supposed to have certain masculine traits. And you know this for a fact. You know this for a fact because if a guy dresses up in a frock and puts a picture of himself on a matrimonial site, he can wait for 10,000 years and there's not going to be anybody who's going to show interest. Any
Mm.
girl who has any common sense is not going to go and approach a guy who's wearing a frock on a matrimonial site. And I'm not talking about the Scottish kilt or whatever. That's another, that is okay. That they have their own um,
Yeah.
ethos that works that context. But if I wear a frock, I look like Barbie girl, and I put up a picture. I'm sorry, somebody's going to think I'm a loony. But likewise, if a girl dresses like properly like a guy, I don't mean just wearing a suit because you can have feminine suits also. But if she actually comes across like a guy, it's again very unlikely that she's going to find a typical suitor. And so now there will be a sort of subgenre, subgroup, underground group where they might like each other and things like that. But those are rare exceptions. And
Mhm.
that's what I mean, that if you just statistically poll the level of interest, you universally they will get less interest. Implies that it is not meant to be a norm, but it is an exception.
Mm.
And somebody once said something very nice: embrace the exceptions, but stick to the norms. You embrace the exceptions because you don't want to make a person feel left out. But when it comes to creating rules and regulations in society, do not use the exceptions and make the rules out of them. So there is, and frankly, I'll be very clear about this. It's not normal to see two guys kissing on screen. It's not. You know, it's not because today, if your children are going to watch something like that, it's going to confuse them when they are like 5, 6, 7 years old. Because we teach our children that okay, man marries woman. That's it. There's a mommy, there's a daddy, amma, appa, that kind of thing, right? That's what you teach your kids. Now I'm not again. Now somebody will be like, oh, you're against certain communities. No, I'm just saying that if a child has to make such choices, it has to be made after a certain age of maturity. If a child is not allowed to drink until they are 18, how dare society expect them to experiment with their gender and sexuality while they are in their teenage years? You just cannot do that. And that is why I would say if a parent wants to avoid gender dysmorphia in their children, and I say this because I know parents who are going through this kind of stuff. Like personally, I have been told stories by people, and just get your kids off social media. Don't give them social media until they hit at least 16 years old. It sounds very draconian, but they'll thank you afterwards. Okay, so anyway, what you lose here is you lose a lot because when you rub against the order, you're going against the natural flow. The order is put into motion by Ishvara, and we as free-willed creatures have the capacity to go against this order. But doing so is the equivalent of going against gravity. There's you try it and find out, right? Find out the consequences. Some consequences are very obvious, and some are delayed consequences, and some are not obvious because it's not plain to see the truth is not always very plain. Beautiful. Okay, so I think we'll let's see how long this next section is. Okay, it's just one half page or something. So if you can continue reading this, then we can discuss if there's anything, and then we can close. So sorry, I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. So it's very easy to judge, like especially because this is again not a long form commentary, because these are sensitive topics, and I understand the nuances and the subtleties that all all sides can claim to have, right? That okay, but you haven't considered this, and there are a lot of things to consider. It's not about being close-minded or open-minded, because sometimes what happens is when we speak and when we give an opinion, depending on how much time the other person has to listen to these opinions, influences how people will perceive your opinion as well. For example, if this conversation about this gender dysmorphia and all could continue for an hour, I'm less likely to come across as bigoted. If I have only 2 minutes to speak, suppose, then it's very easy to be like, oh, Prashant's being a total bigot because he doesn't understand the complexities of the issue. And what I'm trying to say over here is that this long form conversation is very important to have with kids as well. Because usually what happens is, suppose you are an executive in a company, you usually have a go no go, right? You'll either give a thumbs up to the project or you'll give a thumbs down. Now, the thumbs up is the aggregate of all of the thought processes, the micro thought processes that played into the pros of that decision. The thumbs down is the aggregate of all the micro thought processes that played into the cons of that decision. And if the cons outweigh the decision, then you'll give it a thumbs down. If the pros outweigh the cons, then you'll give it a thumbs up. But now, suppose there's a discussion that's happening at an executive level, and they have to arrive at a decision quickly because there's a whole scandal out on Wall Street and the stock is crashing and the CEO has to do something. And he'll say, okay, let's do XYZ. Now he has to make a decision, the CEO. He cannot say that, oh, this is too complicated, I cannot decide, because you have to decide. But if the people were not present in the boardroom, the 8 or 10 hour long board meeting that was there, and if all that they saw was, what the TV coverage of thumbs up or thumbs down for that decision, then they'll be like, oh, this guy did not think about all of the consequences. So I just wanted to warn about the dangers of this kind of discussion also, which is that sometimes it may appear that why are we sort of stretching this theme a little bit, and why are we not just giving a clear response or a very clear but short response? TLDR, right? Too long didn't read, that kind of equivalent. And the danger of doing so is that it can be misinterpreted. And that's why I feel a lot more comfortable discussing these matters over here in this kind of setup as opposed to on Facebook or wherever else, because those posts are very short and there's always but what if. And this platform gives us the ability to actually discuss the what ifs and the but did you think about this, but did you think about that. And so the aggregate opinion that I have, aside from all of the nuances that we can always discuss further, is that gender dysmorphia is majorly a psychological issue. Majorly. Now, if somebody thinks that this is a very uncompassionate take, where we are not thinking about the people who are actually born with different genitalia and whatnot, then all I'm trying to say is, if you have these exceptions, you have to embrace them, because that's what makes us human, that's what makes us dharmic, because embracing the exceptions is also part of society. Today, every society will have its own underground subcultures, and you don't want them to be underground. You want them to be part of who we are as a people, part of the human experience, because this is the common human project that we are all sharing. The problem begins when a small minority becomes a loud vocal minority, where they begin to express that the minority view should actually become the majority view. So suppose somebody has gender dysmorphia, truly, not the psychological cases, true gender dysmorphia. Do not expect me to go to my LinkedIn profile and put he or him on my profile, because a few people need to declare what their pronouns are. That is what we call the minority oppressing the majority. It's a form of oppression. And Indian people, especially, I have to say this clearly. Indian people love to follow these norms, especially if they come to the West, if they're trying to apply for an American job. the first thing they'll do is they'll go to the LinkedIn and they'll put that he, him check mark. And every time you go and change your pronouns on LinkedIn, you are actually sending a signal to society that my pronouns are not the ones that I am born with, but I will grow up and choose what my pronouns are, and you better call me by the pronouns that I decide to choose. This is a very unhealthy trend in society because a pronoun is nothing but a grammatical artifact. That's it. We are not thinking about philosophy or politics when we use words like you, me, him, her, she, him, all of these things. We're not thinking about politics, we're not thinking about culture, we're not thinking about society. We are using grammar as a simple construct to get some stuff done. Give him $5. It's a sentence. I'm not focused on his political identity when I say he or him. The moment we start mandating pronouns, we are actually politicizing language, and we are turning language into a tool of the people who will vie to control that language. So, therefore, I strongly discourage anybody, especially if you are a self respecting Sanatana Dharmi who wants to abide by the laws of Dharma that Ishwar has put forth as the very order of the cosmos. Don't get into the stupidity. That's my soapbox criticism of this he, him, she, her customized pronouns. Pronouns are not meant to be customized. You are who you are. And if, suppose, somebody does not identify as what they are, they will be respectful enough to tell you that, hey, by the way, call me by he instead of she. And then you can choose to abide or not. That's up to you. But do not let anybody control your use of language. What matters is that you're trying to be respectful. You're not trying to be disrespectful, but you're using language only as a medium of communication, not as an entry point into social identity and politics. Do not politicize language, and do not give fodder to the people who are trying to do it because you are too ignorant to know that that's being done through you. Okay, that's it. We can continue this part.
The significance of battle in the Gita. In the Gita, we have a conflict between two groups of people based on a historical event. One group was ready to compromise the means and go against the dharma, even though the dharma is so very important. The other group was committed to maintaining the moral order, the dharma. This conflict can also be looked upon as one between a person's common sense knowledge and what he or she wants to accomplish, an inner war, an inner Mahabharata, so to speak. After all, every war takes place first in one's mind and only later outside. The moral order is considered to be so important that a person will sacrifice everything for its sake. In the Mahabharata, there are many stories of such sacrifice. One story is about a man who gave up his kingdom and everything else he had in order to uphold the universal value of speaking truth. Because India is a place where dharma is important, it was referred to in the Gita as Dharma Kshetra. The Veda rules the hearts of the people, and everything subserves the order of dharma. In the country of Bharata, in a place called Kurukshetra, these two groups of people have assembled, prepared to fight. One group does not understand the value of values, and the other group does. All eyes were upon Arjuna, considered to be the greatest archer. Arjuna's driver was none other than Lord Krishna. The illustration of Arjuna seated in his magnificent chariot, drawn by white horses and driven by Lord Krishna, is very beautiful in that it relates to one's own life. This illustration also appears elsewhere in the Veda, in the Kathopanishad.
Wonderful. Any questions here? Okay. So let me close off the recording. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.